6 Navy SEALs came out of the black water that night, and the man who ran the emergency department decided their lives made a fine enough joke. He lined up the quietest nurse on the floor, the one the residents called slow, and handed her all 6, while the security cameras rolled, and nobody stopped him. Then the storm ate the power. The surgeons were sealed off 3 floors above, and the monitors began failing one after another, and the nurse nobody trusted set her jaw and reached for a blade the way no civilian ever should. In under an hour, she pulled 6 men back from the edge, with techniques no floor nurse was ever taught, and what happened after that emptied every voice in the building. Before we go on, welcome to Silent Rank's Stories. If you believe nobody should ever measure a nurse by how little she says, tap, like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight. Stay to the end, because the moment this hospital went quiet is a moment you will not forget. Cape Farrell Regional Medical Center sat 2 miles from the water, close enough that the night nurses could smell salt through the ambulance doors when the wind turned. Delia Marsh liked that smell more than she let anyone see. She worked the back half of the board, the beds nobody fought over, and she worked them clean. She was 34 years old, a shade over 5'6", with dark hair, pulled back tight, and gray eyes that most people read as tired. Her scrubs were plain navy. Her badge said R, and nothing more. She was built lean in a way strangers mistook for delicate, and she let them keep the mistake, because a mistake like that cost her nothing. She was deaf in the left ear. Almost nobody knew. She had learned to stand with her right side to the room, to turn her head a half-inch toward a voice, to read a mouth when the alarms got loud. On slow nights, she kept a hand in her pocket, and in that pocket, she kept a coin worn smooth on both faces that she never once set on a counter where a coworker might pick it up and ask. That Thursday started ordinary. Delia restocked the airway drawers before her shift because the day team never did. She checked the warmer, counted the chest tubes, wiped down a laryngoscope handle that somebody had left greasy. A resident named Park watched her do it and smirked at another resident, and the second one smirked back. She heard it anyway, the little laugh, the kind that meant they thought she polished trays because she could not do anything harder. She let them keep that too. Dr. Preston Vance arrived at 7 with a tablet under his arm and a smile he had practiced in a mirror. He was the director of emergency services, and he ran the department the way a man runs a room he believes he owns. He was tall and easy, and good at the parts of the job that had an audience. He liked donors. He liked the quarterly numbers. He liked the sound of his own name over the intercom. He did not like nurses who wrote up staffing gaps in triplicate, and Delia had written up more than one. He stopped at the charge desk and looked her over like a line on a spreadsheet. "Marsh," he said, "you filed another safety note. Flow again. Triage again." 2 therapists got pulled off the floor Tuesday, she said. A patient waited. I documented it. You document everything. He said it as if it were a flaw. A few people at the desk chuckled on cue. Vance liked that they chuckled. He tapped his tablet and moved on, and Delia went back to her board, and the ordinary night kept being ordinary for another 2 hours. Then the storm found the coast. It came in off the water, faster than the forecast, the kind of squall that turns a training night into a nightmare in minutes. The lights over the ambulance bay swung. Rain hit the glass hard enough to sound like gravel. At 9 minutes past 9, the baseline lit up on the red phone, and the charge nurse, Nadia Okonkwo, went still with the receiver against her ear. "Say again," Nadia said. "Then how many?" Then she looked up and her face had changed. 6 inbound, mass casualty, military, maritime accident off the point. "Naval hospital," someone asked. "Cut off," Nadia said. "Causeway is underwater. They are coming here." The bay doors banged. and the first medics came through soaked to the skin, and behind them, the stretchers rolled in one after another. 6 of them, 6 young men who did not look like patients, so much as men the sea had tried to keep. They had been on the water for a night exercise, a small boat run in the dark, and something had gone wrong out past the surf line. A rigid boat had gone over. A second had struck it. The wind had done the rest. The medics had pulled them from black water in the rain, and now the water came off them in sheets onto the trauma floor. Delia counted before she thought about counting. 1 man with a chest that lifted wrong and a color that was already leaving his lips. 1 with a thigh wrapped in a field, dressing gone dark and heavy. 1 shaking so hard the stretcher rails rattled skin the wrong shade of gray, a near drowning gone cold. 1 pinned so long under something that both his legs had swollen tight inside his wet fatigues. 1 young one, the youngest, sitting up and talking, insisting he was fine. And Delia looked at him longest of all, because a man who insists he is fine after a night like that is a man who has not started bleeding where you can see it yet. And 1 more, not here, still coming, the worst, the one the medics on the radio would not put a number on. The department filled with noise. Families were not here yet, but the base had sent people. And a young lieutenant in a wet uniform stood at the tape, with his jaw locked, and the monitors began their chorus, and the residents froze, the way residents freeze when the room gets bigger than their training. Vance walked out of his office to see what the noise was. He took it in. 6 men. 6 sets of alarms. Surgeons and the trauma attending stuck 3 floors up because the storm had dropped the elevators and jammed the stairwell locks on the surgical floor. Half his night team standing flat-footed. And in the middle of it, 1 plain Navy nurse with wet shoes already gloving up. Something in him decided this was funny. Well, Vance said loud enough for the desk and loud enough for the cameras. He lifted his tablet like a man about to make an announcement. Nurse Marsh has opinions about flow, about triage, about how the rest of us run this floor. He spread his arms toward the 6 stretchers. So let us all watch a professional at work. They are yours, Marsh. All of them. Show us. The room did not laugh. Not this time. Park the resident half smiled, and then stopped when nobody joined him. Dr. Elias Bourne, the attending on shift, took a step forward, with his mouth already open to say something about the time and the place, and Vance turned toward the security camera over the charge desk on purpose, so the little red light could see how reasonable he was being. Delia did not answer him. She looked at the 6 men the way a person reads water before they step into it. She pulled a second pair of gloves from the wall and snapped them over the first. She turned her right ear to the room, and when she finally spoke, it was not to Vance at all. "Nadia," she said, in a voice that had lost every soft edge it had carried for 2 years. "We are going to sort them by who dies first." The room did not move at first. Nadia looked at the 6 stretchers, then at Delia, then at the men in scrubs standing around the edges of the floor, like they were waiting for someone to tell them it was all right to help. "Bay 1 the chest," Delia said. "Bay 2 the thigh. Bay 3 the cold one. Bay 4 the crush. Bay 5 the young one who says he is fine. Leave Bay 6 open. The last one is not here yet, and when he comes, he is going to need the biggest room we have." Nobody had assigned bays. She had just made the map exist by saying it out loud. Vance folded his arms. "You heard her," he said, and there was still a smile under his voice because he thought he was watching a person walk off a cliff. "Let us see the miracle." Delia was already gone. She crossed to Bay 1, where a young man with a barrel chest and a Navy tattoo on his forearm was working too hard to breathe. The medic beside him rattled off what he had. "Blunt chest went over hard when the boat rolled. We bagged him twice on the water. He keeps dropping." Delia put 2 fingers on the side of his neck, then flattened her palm against the right side of his chest, and watched the left side lift alone. The trachea had begun to lean. His color was going the way lips go when a lung is pushing a heart out of its place. "Tension," she said. "This side is filling with air and squeezing everything that matters. Bourne, I need you in here or I need you out of my light. Pick now." Dr. Elias Bourne had been an attending for 6 years and had never once been spoken to like that by a nurse. He stepped in. "What do you want?" he said, and to his credit, he did not make it a challenge. 14 gauge second space mid-clavicular right side. Delia said, already prepping the skin. "I would rather have a tube, but the tubes are in the surgical tray, and the surgical tray is behind a door on a floor we cannot reach. So we buy him a breath the fast way first." Vance appeared at the glass wall of the bay. "Marsh, that is a physician procedure. Do not decompress a chest." Delia did not look up. "Then send me a physician who can reach a needle in the next 20 seconds. Bourne reached for the needle himself. His hand was not as steady as hers. She saw it, and she did not shame him for it. She just moved her own fingers to the landmark, pressed until she felt the top edge of the third rib under the skin, and set his hand right above it. "There," she said. "Over the rib, not under it. There is a vessel and a nerve that live under every rib, and they will make you sorry. Straight in, listen for the hiss, then breathe with me." He went in. There was a sound, a small rush like a bottle giving up its seal, and the man on the stretcher took a breath that actually filled him. The number on the monitor stopped falling. 79, 84, 90. Somewhere behind the glass, a resident whispered. How did she know it was that side before the film? Delia was already taping a flutter, dressing over the catheter with one hand, while her other hand found the man's pulse again. "Because his neck told me," she said to no one, mostly to herself. "You do not need a film. You need to look." The SEAL blinked up at her. His eyes tracked. His hand came up an inch off the rail and touched the back of her wrist, and his mouth moved, trying to say something. "Save it," Delia said, and for one word her voice went soft. Softer than the rest of it, the way a person is gentle with someone they have carried before. "Breathe. That is the whole job right now. Just breathe." She turned the left side of her head away from a crashing tray and put her right ear back toward the monitor, listened to it settle into a rhythm she liked, and only then let go of his wrist. "He is not fixed," she told Bourne. "He is borrowed. He needs a tube and a surgeon and a scan, and until the stairs open, we hold him here. Watch this dressing. If it stops hissing and he gets worse, you take the whole thing off and let it breathe open. Do not wait for permission." "That is not," Bourne started. "That is the difference between a live patient and a good chart," Delia said, and she was already stepping out of the bay. Vance moved to block the doorway with his shoulder, the small power a man uses when he cannot find a bigger one. "You are performing beyond your scope, Marsh, in front of a camera, and I am documenting every second of it." Delia stopped in front of him. She had to look up to meet his eyes, and she did it without any effort at all, the way you look at a door you already know how to open. "Good," she said. "Document it. When you play it back, count how many of them were breathing at the start, and how many are breathing now. That is the only number that is going to matter." She went around him. She did not push. She just went around, the way water goes around a rock, and the rock stayed a rock, and everybody on the floor saw it happen. Bay 2 was already loud. The young man there had a thigh wrapped in a dressing that had failed somewhere on the water, and the blood had come up through it, slow and steady and wrong. A resident named Coyle had both gloved hands pressed on the wound itself and was pressing in the place that felt like it should work and was not working. "Higher," Delia said, coming in fast. "Not the wound, the crease. Feel for the pulse in the groin and put your whole weight above it, not on it. I have direct pressure, Coyle said, defensive, scared. You have pressure on a river downstream of the dam, Delia said. She put her own hands where his were not deep into the crease of the hip and leaned her body over her locked arms until the man under her flinched even through the fentanyl. The dark spread under the dressing slowed, then stopped climbing. Sorry, she murmured to the man on the stretcher, low, private, in a voice that did not match anything else about the room. Pain means you are still in here with me. Stay in here. The blood stopped painting the sheet. Coyle stared at her hands. You want a tourniquet high and tight, Delia said, but not the way the poster shows you. Windlass, then a second turn, then you write the time on his forehead, where the next person cannot miss it. Somebody warm the fluids before you hang them. He has been in cold water for an hour, and cold blood does not clot. Warm, not cold. Everything about tonight is warm, not cold. Coyle nodded fast, 3 quick jerks of the chin. Delia caught his eyes. Slow nod, she said. Fast nod means you are running from the fear. Slow nod means you heard me. Try again. He breathed. He nodded slow. There you are, she said. Now, do the job in front of you, and only that one. Behind the glass, Dr. Bourne watched her turn a shaking resident into a working one without a single insult, and he felt something cold settle into his stomach because he had trained for years to do what she was doing with her voice, and he could not do it. This was not floor nursing. This was not something a person learned restocking airway drawers on nights. This was a person who had done this in worse rooms than this one. Rooms with no walls. Rooms with no help coming. He watched her reach into her pocket between the bays just for a second, the way a smoker reaches for a pack that is not there anymore. Her fingers closed on something small and round and smooth, and then let it go. And then her hands were back at work, as if the pocket had never happened. Vance saw none of it. Vance was looking at the camera. The intercom crackled. Base to Cape Feral. The 6th is en route. 2 arrests during extrication. They are working him now. 2 minutes out. The young lieutenant at the tape closed his eyes. Delia looked at Bay 6, the room she had left empty on purpose, and then at the ambulance doors where the rain was still coming down, like the sky had a grudge. She wiped her wet hair back with the inside of her forearm and rolled her shoulders once the way a person does before they pick up something heavy. Nadia, she said, get me every unit of O negative we have in the building down here before that door opens, and find out how far those stairwell doors really are from open, because in 2 minutes I am going to need a surgeon a lot more than Dr. Vance needs a video. For 2 minutes, Cape Feral held its breath, and in the gap between one crisis and the next, something in Delia went somewhere else. It was the cold that did it. It was always the cold. The near-drowned man in Bay 3 had begun to shake harder, that deep, full-body shudder of a core temperature falling through the floor, and when Delia leaned over him to check his pupils, the smell of salt water and cold rubber and diesel came off his suit and went straight past every wall she had ever built. She was not in Cape Feral for a second. She was in the black off a coast with no name in water. So cold it did not feel like cold anymore. It felt like a hand around the chest. There had been a boat and a bad night, and a man whose regulator had failed in the dark, and she had gotten to him. She had actually gotten her hands on him, and the current had turned the 2 of them into one problem. The sea did not want to give back. She remembered the alarm in her own ear, the high, thin ringing that never fully left. After that night, the sound her left ear made now instead of hearing. She remembered surfacing with him. She remembered that it had not been enough. She remembered the exact weight of a man you have carried a long way and still lost. The ringing in her dead ear rose the way it did when the past pushed on it, and then Delia blinked hard once and put her palm flat on the shaking man's sternum, and she was back in Bay 3 with rain on the windows and a job in front of her. "You are not going in the water," she told him quietly, though his eyes were half closed and he could not answer. "Not tonight. I have you." She did not have time for the past. She never had time for the past. That was, if she was honest, most of why she had come here at all. A civilian floor in a coastal town nobody wrote songs about. Beds nobody fought over. A badge that said only RN. She had spent 2 years learning to be a person that no story wanted to tell, and it had almost worked. "Ma'am," a voice said behind her on her right side, which was the only reason she caught it clean. "I mean, Nurse Marsh, what do you need me to do?" She turned. A young man in scrubs stood at the edge of Bay 3 too young to be a resident, an ID clipped to his chest that read, "Student." Corman. He was maybe 20, all knees and elbows, and a fresh haircut that could only come from one kind of barber. "You are the trainee," Delia said. "Rowan." "Yes, ma'am. Riley Rowan. I am on the ER rotation this month. I did my corpsman school, I am reserve, I am not much, but I can do a line, and I can hold pressure, and I can run for things." He said it all in one breath, and his eyes kept sliding to the 6 stretchers and coming back to her like he could not decide whether to be terrified or thrilled. "Everybody else looks like they do not know what to do. You look like you know what to do." "Everybody knows what to do," Delia said. "Most people just wait for somebody to say it is allowed. You are not going to wait," she pointed. "Bay 3. This man is cold to his core. I want him off that wet suit. Warm blankets, warm fluids on the warmer, and I want a temperature every 10 minutes written on the sheet where I can see it. He's going to look like he's getting worse before he gets better, and you are not going to panic, because a cold heart is a stubborn heart, not a stopped one. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Slow nod, Rowan." He blinked, then nodded slow, and something in his shoulders settled. "He was in the water, same as you would have been," Delia said softer, only for him. "You are going to warm your brother up. That is the whole mission for the next 20 minutes. Go." Rowan went, and he moved better than half the residents on the floor because he had been given one thing to do and a reason to do it. And that Delia had learned a long time ago was the entire secret of turning a scared person into a useful one. Across the floor, Vance had cornered Bourne near the charge desk. Delia could not hear the words over the storm and the monitors, but she did not need to. She could read the shape of it. Vance was pointing at her and pointing at the camera and saying something that had the word liability in it, because men like Vance always found their way to that word eventually. Bourne was not nodding. That was new. An hour ago, Bourne would have nodded. "She is an RN running a mass casualty," Vance was saying loud enough now that it carried. "When the board reviews this, and they will, every procedure in those bays lands on you and me, Elias. Every one. You want your name next to an unlicensed chest decompression." "I want my name next to 6 men who lived," Bourne said, and he surprised himself saying it. Vance stared at him like a machine that had returned the wrong change. Delia let them have it. She had a cold man to warm and a bleeding man to hold, and a chest she had only borrowed, and she had 30 seconds left before the worst of the 6 came through the doors. She reached into her pocket one more time, closed her fingers around the coin worn smooth on both faces, the coin she had carried out of that black water and never once put down, and she made herself a promise she had made in worse places than this. Not tonight. Nobody else goes in the water tonight. Then the ambulance doors blew open, and the rain came in sideways, and the medics came through the wall of it soaked and shouting, and on the stretcher between them was a man the sea had very nearly taken all the way. The medics were talking before the stretcher cleared the doors. "This is your worst one. Pinned under the hull during the extraction, we lost pulses twice getting him free, got him back both times. Crushed to the pelvis chest is bad. He has been down and cold, and he is fighting us the whole way, which is the only good news I have got." Delia was at the stretcher before it stopped rolling. She put her hand flat on his chest and her fingers on his neck in the same motion and read him the way you read a sky you do not trust. His pulse was there, and then not there, and then there again, thready skipping a man on a rope over a long drop. "Bay 6, she said. "Now, row and stay on your cold one, do not leave him. Nadia, all the O-neg and I mean all of it, and get me the rapid transfuser if this building owns one." They moved him, and that was when the lights went out. Not a flicker. The whole floor dropped into black at once, the monitors dying mid-tone, the ventilator in bay, one falling silent, and for 3 full seconds, Cape Feral was nothing but the sound of the storm and the sound of people not breathing. 3 seconds is a long time in a room full of the dying. It is long enough for every honest person to be afraid, and every dishonest one to hear their own heartbeat. "Bag him," Delia said into the dark, calm flat, a voice built for exactly this. "Whoever is on bay, 1 bag by hand. Do not stop. Everybody else hands stay where they were. Nobody lets go of anybody." The emergency power came up in strips, 1 bank of lights at a time, the monitors rebooting in a stagger. Bay 6 came back. Bay 3 flickered and held. And in the half-light, Delia was already cutting the wet fatigues off the man from the water, because a pelvis you cannot see is a pelvis you cannot save. "Talk to me," she said to the medic who had come in with him. "What is his name?" "They call him Chief. Chief Boone. That is all I got. The rest is under a security wrapper. He runs the team." The other 5 were his men. Delia understood it in 1 beat, the whole shape of the night 6 men off 1 boat, and this one the one who would have been counting the others as they came out of the water, the one who would not have let go until every head was accounted for. She had known that man before. She had, in another life, been that man. Chief Boone's eyes came half open. His lips were gray. And when Delia leaned in close to check his pupils, her right ear turned toward his mouth. Out of pure habit, he looked at her hands moving over him quick and certain and unwasted, and something crossed his ruined face that was not pain. His mouth moved. Almost nothing came out. But Delia was close, and she read it off his lips more than she heard it. "Riptide," he said. The word went into her like cold water. She did not stop moving. Her hands did not falter. But for a quarter of a second, her whole body knew something the rest of the room did not. And Dr. Bourne, standing at the foot of the bed, saw it the small stillness in a person who has just been called a name they buried. "Easy," Delia said to him. Low, so low, it did not carry past the bed. "Do not spend a breath on me. Spend it staying here. You Bohum." Boone got out wet and broken. "You were the coast, the team before mine. You are the one they." "Later," she said. "There is no later if you do not stay. So stay. That is an order, Chief, and you know how to take one." His eyes held hers, and something in him that had been sliding stopped sliding, and the monitor Rowan had gotten back online blipped weak, then a little stronger. Bourne heard the word, too. He looked at Delia across the body of a man the sea had tried 3 times to keep, and for the first time all night, he did not see a floor nurse who polished trays. He saw a person who had a name that other men said like a prayer. "Who?" He started. "Not now," Delia said. She had both hands buried in the crease of Boone's hip, holding a pelvis together with pressure and will, while the blood tried to leave him from the inside, and she did not have a spare piece of herself for the question. Born binder, pelvic binder high over the greater trochanters, not the belly, everybody always puts it too high. Coil another line big as you can get other arm. Rowan, do not you dare leave that cold man, but shout me his temp now. 90.1. Rowan called from Bay 3, and his voice cracked in the middle and steadied by the end. Coming up, Delia said. Good. Keep it coming. And then, because the night wasn't done, being cruel, a monitor screamed from Bay 5. Bay 5 was the young one, the one who had insisted he was fine, the one Delia had looked at the longest. She knew before she turned. She had known an hour ago. A man who walks off a night like that talking is a man whose body has not yet told him what it is doing in the dark. His name, she would learn, was Petty Officer Danny Vasquez, 22 years old, the newest man on the team, the one the others called the Kid. He had been sitting up cracking a joke about the water 20 minutes ago, and now he was slumped against the rail with one pupil blown wide and the other tight. His words gone to mush his good arm drifting like it belonged to someone else. That is a head bleed, Delia said, and for the first time all night, there was something under the flatness of her voice, something that was almost grief and was mostly fury. That is a bleed that has been growing since the boat, and he talked right through it, because that is what they train these kids to do, walk it off, and it almost worked on us too. He was fine, Coyle said, helpless. He was talking, I cleared him he was. He was compensating, Delia said. Young and strong, and compensating right up until he could not. She was moving between Bay 6 and Bay 5 now, a hand on the chief, her eyes on the Kid holding two men on two ropes at once. He needs a scanner, and a neurosurgeon, and a drill, and every one of those is on a floor we still cannot reach. She turned to the charge desk, and her voice cut across the whole floor, and it was not asking anything anymore. I need those stairwell doors open. I do not care how. I have a chief who is bleeding out of his pelvis and a 22-year-old with a bleed pushing on his brain, and I have exactly one thing I do not have, and that is time. So somebody get me those stairs, or somebody get me Dr. Vance so he can explain to a camera why the door stayed shut. Vance came because his name in that sentence pulled him like a hook. You do not summon me across my own floor, he said. But there was a thin thread of something new in it. Now, because a man with one blown pupil is a thing even Vance could not spin into a joke. Then do not make me, Delia said. The surgical floor. The stairwell locks failed closed when the power dropped. Facilities can override them at the panel. You have the authority to make that call, and you are the only one on this floor who does. So make it or hand it to someone who will. Those locks are a security system, Vance said. I cannot just. You have a 22-year-old bleeding into his skull, Delia said, and a chief bleeding into his pelvis, and both of them are going to die on your camera if that door stays shut. Read the room, doctor. Read it once tonight. For a long second, Vance did not move, and Delia watched him do the math that men like him always did. The math of what looks worse on paper. And then, because even Vance could count to 2 dead men on a recording, he keyed his radio and told facilities to override the surgical stairwell, and he said it in a voice that tried to sound like it had been his idea. That is going to take 4 minutes, he said. Then I have 4 minutes, Delia said, and turned back to her men. She could not fix the Kid. She knew it, and she did not pretend otherwise. What she could do was buy him the minutes, and buying minutes was the thing she had been better at than almost anyone alive in a life she had spent 2 years trying not to remember. Rowan, she called. Leave the cold man to the blankets now he is holding come to me. The trainee crossed the floor at a run. Head of the bed, up 30 degrees this one, the young one. His name is Vasquez. Say his name to him. Vasquez, Rowan said, leaning in. Hey, petty officer, stay with us. Keep doing that. When a name is the only rope you have, you throw the name. Delia was drawing something up, checking the label twice, her lips moving as she confirmed the concentration. This is going to shrink the swelling for a little while. It is not a fix. It is a door held open. The fix is upstairs behind a lock that is opening right now. Behind her, at Bay 6, Chief Boone made a sound, and Delia's head turned her right ear coming around, and she read the monitor before she reached him. His pressure was sliding again. She was standing between two dying men, one hand toward each, and for one breath, the whole floor seemed to understand that everything hung on where she chose to put her weight. I cannot be in two places, she said out loud, and it was not weakness, it was command. It was a leader naming the problem so the room could help solve it. Bourne, the chief is yours for 90 seconds. Keep the binder tight. Keep the blood going. Do not let the pressure drop past what it is right now. Coyle, you own the kid's airway. If he stops protecting it, you tell me before you touch it. Rowan, name and vitals, out loud. Both bays alternate. You are giving a nurse and a trainee critical patients, Vance said, and it came out smaller than he wanted it to. I am giving trained hands the thing they were trained for, Delia said without turning around. The only person on this floor treating that like a joke is you. Nadia laughed once sharp before she could stop herself and covered it, and it did not matter because half the desk had heard it and half the desk agreed. The 4 minutes moved like an hour and passed like a breath. Delia lived inside them the way she had learned to live inside the worst minutes of her life, narrow and total, no past, no future, only the next correct action and the one after that. She held the kid's pressure with the medication and the tilt of the bed. She held the chief's with her own 2 hands when Bourne slipped. She kept her right ear turned to the monitors, and her voice level and low, and the room, without ever deciding to, began to move to the rhythm she set. And somewhere in those 4 minutes, without anyone announcing it, Delia Marsh was running the trauma floor of Cape Farrell Regional Medical Center. And every doctor, nurse, tech, and medic on it was following a plain Navy nurse they had watched Polish trays, and not one of them was waiting for Vance to say it was allowed. The stairwell door banged open at the far end of the corridor. The surgical team came down in a cluster, breathless and furious, a trauma attending named Priya Rao at the front, still tying her gown. 2 surgical residents behind her, an OR nurse with a rolling tray of the things Delia had been begging the building for all night. What in God's name is happening on my floor? Rao said, and then she stopped, because the floor did not look like chaos. It looked like a floor being run. Report, Rao said to the room. Bourne opened his mouth, and then he closed it, and he looked at Delia, and Rao followed his eyes. Delia straightened up from Bay 6 with blood to her wrists and gave it in one clean breath. No wasted word, the way a person gives a report who has given 10,000 of them in places with no walls. 6 off a capsized boat, all military hypothermic to a man. Bay 1 tension pneumo needle decompressed, needs a tube and a chest holding. Bay 2 femoral hemorrhage, controlled with junctional pressure and a high tourniquet, warmed products running. Bay 3 near drowning core, temp 91 and climbing rewarming in progress. Bay 4 crushed to both legs, watch his kidneys and his potassium labs pending. He is your slow burn. Bay 5 blown pupil mush speech, that is an expanding intracranial bleed in a 22-year-old, who compensated right through the exam. He needs a scanner and a drill 5 minutes ago. Bay 6 is your worst. Pinned under the hull, 2 arrests during extrication. Pelvic crush chest. Is soft binder. Is on 3rd unit going in. He keeps trying to leave and I keep telling him no. Rao stared at her. Who coordinated this? I did. You are. Rao looked at the badge. You are the RN. I am the RN, Delia said. Take the chief and the kid first. The kid does not have 5 minutes. The chief has maybe 10. Everyone else I can hold. Rao was already moving toward Bay 5, and she did not argue, because everything the nurse had said had been exactly right. In exactly the order she would have said it herself. And there is a particular thing that happens on a trauma surgeon's face when she realizes the person handing her the floor knows the floor better than she does. Vance stepped forward into the gap, into the one open second, and reached for it, the way a drowning man reaches for a name that is not his. Under my supervision, he said. The department was overwhelmed, and I delegated operational tasks to available nursing staff while maintaining command oversight of the resuscitation. The floor went quiet in a new way. Nadia's mouth fell open. Bourne turned and looked at Vance with something close to disgust. Rowan, 20 years old, and holding a dying man's name in his mouth, stopped and stared. And Delia, wrist deep in Chief Boone's ruined hip, did not defend herself, which was somehow worse for Vance than any accusation, because her silence let the whole room measure the size of his lie against the blood on her hands. Chief Boone's eyes found Vance, and with the last clear breath the night had left him, the man the sea could not keep, said wet and low, but perfectly plain, liar. The word sat in the middle of the floor, where everyone could see it. Vance opened his mouth to bury it, and that was the moment the ambulance doors opened one more time, and this time, no stretcher came through. 2 men entered in wet Navy service uniforms under dark coats, and behind them came a woman in a plain jacket, with a federal badge on a lanyard, and a hard, flat calm that filled the room faster than the storm had. The taller sailor had gray at his temples, and a chest full of ribbon under the coat, and a face weathered by more water than most men ever see. His eyes went across the floor, once fast professional counting heads, and then they found Delia at Bay 6, with blood to her wrists, and everything else in the man went still. This is a restricted resuscitation area, Vance said on reflex, because controlling the door was the last authority he had left. You cannot be in here. The older sailor did not so much as look at him. He crossed the floor and stopped 10 feet from Bay 6, and he came to something that was almost attention, and he said one word. Senior Chief. Delia's hands did not stop, but she closed her eyes for exactly 1 second, and every person who knew her, which by now was most of the floor, understood that a woman who had not flinched at a blown pupil or a bleeding pelvis had just been struck by 2 words. Master Chief Okafor, she said without turning, you are getting rain on my floor. You always did keep a tidy floor, Riptide. Rao looked up from the kid. Bourne mouthed the word. Rowan said it out loud without meaning to. Riptide. The federal woman stepped forward and opened a slim folder. Special Agent Lena Cho, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. She let it land, and it landed. We came because a name on tonight's casualty manifest pinged a file we already had open on this hospital. We did not expect the name to be the one running the trauma floor. Vance found his voice, and it had a crack in it now. Whatever her background, she is a registered nurse who performed multiple physician-level procedures without. She is a registered nurse. Agent Cho said, reading from the folder without any particular hurry, who is also, per verified service records, former United States Navy Special Amphibious Reconnaissance Corpsman, attached to Naval Special Warfare. Senior Chief Hospital Corpsman. 2 Bronze Stars with Combat V. A Navy and Marine Corps medal for pulling 3 men out of the water, off a coast this folder is not allowed to name. The rest is redacted by command. The floor did not gasp. It stopped breathing entirely the way it had when the power died, except this time there was no storm to blame. Master Chief Okafor took one more step. "The team on those 6 stretchers," he said quietly, "is the team that inherited the water you used to swim. Half of them grew up on your name, Senior Chief. They teach your call at the schoolhouse, and tonight, the sea handed them to the one civilian floor in 3 counties, with the only person alive who could hold all 6. He shook his head slowly. God has a strange sense of humor. Delia finally looked up from Chief Boone. Her gray eyes were wet and did not spill. "Do not," she said, and it was not to Okafor, it was to all of it. The name, the past, the folder, the water. I have a chief who is still trying to leave, and a kid with a bleed on his brain, and none of what is in that folder puts a drill in his skull. So the sailors can stand there and be proud of me later. Right now, everybody works. And the extraordinary thing, the thing Bourne would tell his own residents about for the rest of his career, was that they did. Rao took the kid toward the elevator, that facilities had finally freed her resident bagging as they went. A surgical resident and the OR nurse took the Chief Delia walking beside the stretcher, with both hands still in the binder, refusing to let go until the doors closed. Coyle held the femoral bleed. Rowan warmed the cold man. Okafor and the young lieutenant moved families through the one safe corridor. The floor ran, and it ran on the rhythm of a nurse Vance had tried to turn into a punchline 4 hours ago. Vance watched his floor obey someone else, and something in him came loose. "The camera," he said to no one, and then he moved fast toward the charge desk, toward the little red light that had recorded all of it. Every joke, every lie, every second of a plain Navy nurse doing what he could not. Agent Cho watched him go and said mildly, "That would be a mistake, Doctor." He did it anyway. He reached the workstation, and his fingers moved on the keys, and the little red light over the charge desk went dark, and the recording of the night, the one that would have ended him, was gone from the hospital server between one breath and the next. He turned around with something like relief on his face, and he found the whole floor looking at him, and he made the second mistake men like him always make. He mistook their silence for defeat. "There is no footage," Vance said. "There is no recording of any of this. What there is an unlicensed corpsman who performed invasive procedures on my floor and a hospital that is going to review every single one of them." He straightened his coat. "You can be a legend on the internet, Marsh. In this building, you are a scope violation." Delia came back from the elevator, empty-handed now. The chief and the kid both gone up to surgery, and she looked at Vance across the floor with something that was almost pity. "You think the camera was the thing that was going to sink you," she said. "You think if you kill the recording, you kill the truth." She pulled off her bloody gloves one and then the other and dropped them in the bin. "That is the mistake you have been making your whole life, Doctor. You think the truth lives on a server." "It does tonight," Vance said. "No," said a small voice from the edge of the floor. "It lives on 2. Everyone turned. Riley Rowan, 20 years old corpsman trainee still holding a warming blanket in his hands, was standing very straight and very pale and very much like a man who had decided to do the bravest thing he would ever do. "The Trauma Bay teaching camera," Rowan said. "The one over Bay 6 for the resident case reviews. It does not save to the hospital server. It uploads straight to the graduate medical education drive. Different system. Different login." He swallowed hard. "You cannot reach it, sir. You do not have access. But I do because students get the training feed, and it has been recording since the first stretcher rolled in. The silence that followed had a different quality than any that had come before it that night." "It saw all of it," Rowan said, his voice shaking and holding at the same time. "It saw you hand her 6 men as a joke. It saw her save them, and it saw you just now at that keyboard. He looked at Delia, not at Vance the whole time, like she was the only fixed point in the room. You cannot fire her, and you cannot delete this one. Vance moved. It was not smart, and it was not planned. It was the pure animal reflex of a man watching the last exit close, and he lunged across the charge desk toward Rowan, toward the boy who held the one recording he could not reach, as if he could take a login off a person with his hands. Delia was between them before anyone saw her cross the floor. She did not hit him. She caught the reaching arm, turned it, and used his own motion to fold him forward over the desk, one hand pinning the wrist high between his shoulder blades, the other flat and light against the back of his neck. It was not violence. It was the opposite of violence. It was the economy of a person who had learned in places with no walls that the smallest correct force applied in the right place ends a thing before it starts. Vance hit the desktop chest first, with a sound that made every lawyer who was not yet in the building wince in advance. "You assaulted me," he gasped into the laminate. "I stopped you tampering with a federal witness and evidence in an open NCIS investigation," Delia said, perfectly level her mouth near his ear. "There is a camera on that, too." Agent Cho was already moving, and she nodded once to Master Chief Okafor, and it was Okafor Audley who set his big weathered hand on Vance's shoulder and held him still, gently, the way you hold a man you have already decided is finished. Preston Vance. Cho said, "You are going to want to stop talking now." They took him out through the corridor, while the whole floor watched, and no one covered their eyes, and no one felt sorry. And somewhere at the far end, Nadia Okonkwo began very quietly to cry, not from fear, from the release of 2 years of it. The night was not over. The night is never over, just because the bad man leaves. Upstairs in an operating room, the kid Danny Vasquez, 22 years old, was still on a table with a neurosurgeon's drill, easing the pressure off his brain, and it was another 2 hours before word came down that the bleed had been reached in time, that he would keep his words and his walk, that the compensating had held just long enough, and the door Delia held open had held just wide enough. Chief Boone came off his table gray and broken, and alive 3 units, and a fixed pelvis, and a chest tube, alive, the kind of alive that is only the start of a long road. But the road existed now, and an hour ago it had not. By dawn, the storm had blown itself out to sea, and Cape Farrell Regional Medical Center was a different building than it had been at dusk. Federal agents worked in the administrative suite. NCIS had the teaching feed clean and complete, and impossible to explain away, and they had the hospital's own logs showing the charge desk recording, deleted at 11 minutes past 10 by Vance's own credentials. A compliance officer who had spent a year signing reviews she knew were incomplete sat in a small room and finally told the truth, and the truth had a name in it, because it turned out the file NCIS had opened before that night was about a young sailor named Petty Officer Marcus Hale, 24 years old, who had come into this same emergency department 8 months earlier with a survivable bleed and had waited 41 minutes for a surgical consult, while 2 of the on-call team were pulled upstairs to a donor reception Vance had promised would run smoothly. Marcus Hale had not survived the 41 minutes. The review had said no deviation from standard of care. Delia had filed 3 anonymous safety reports after that one. NCIS had matched the language in those reports to the after-action format. The Navy taught its corpsmen, and that thread, pulled slowly for 8 months, was the reason 2 sailors and a federal agent had walked through the doors on the worst night of Preston Vance's life and found the author of those reports standing in the middle of the floor with blood to her wrists. Delia learned all of this sitting in the family waiting room at 6 in the morning with a paper cup of coffee. She was not drinking, and when Agent Cho finished telling her, Delia was quiet for a long time. "You could have come forward," Cho said, Any time in the last 8 months. With your record, 1 call, and this hospital would have opened like a can." "I know," Delia said. "Why didn't you?" Delia turned the coin over in her fingers, the one worn smooth on both faces, and for the first time in 2 years, she set it on the table where another person could see it. "Because coming forward is loud," she said. "And I came here to be quiet. I spent 9 years being the person they called when everyone else was already lost, and I was good at it, and it cost more than I had. So I found a coastal town nobody writes about, and a badge that only says RN, and a back half of the board that nobody fights over, and I told myself that if I just stayed small enough, the water would stop following me." She looked up. "It followed me anyway. It came in on 6 stretchers. It always finds a door." Joe looked at the coin, then at her. "Marcus Hale," she said. "You never met him. But you filed for him 3 times. I met him," Delia said quietly. "I met every version of him. The one you get to in time, and the one you do not. I have carried both out of the water." She closed her hand back over the coin. "Silence is not peace, Agent. I let myself believe it was for 2 years. But silence is just fear that learned to hold still. Marcus Hale died in a hallway because too many people around him held still. I am done holding still." Master Chief Okafor came to find her at 8, and he sat down across from her without a word, the way old sailors sit. And after a while he said, "You could come back, you know. Not to the teams. But the Navy would find 100 places for what is in your head. Instructors like you do not grow on trees." "I have a place," Delia said. "It has a back half of a board, and a trainee who is going to be better than any of them, and it has an ER that just found out what it is allowed to do when nobody is standing on its neck." She almost smiled. "Somebody has to teach these people that they knew how to save those men all along. They were just waiting for permission. I'm going to spend a while teaching them to stop waiting." Okafor nodded slowly. "Riptide," he said, and it was a goodbye and a benediction at once. "Marsh," she corrected him gently. "It is just Marsh now. That is enough." A month later, Cape Farrell announced a new emergency safety program, and 4 lines went up on the wall above the charge desk, where every shift could see them. No patient waits unseen. No staff member is punished for raising a safety concern. No administrator overrides clinical triage. And one more, which Riley Rowan had insisted on, and which Delia had tried and failed to have removed. No one is ever just a nurse. Preston Vance pleaded out before it ever reached a jury, because there is no explaining a teaching camera to 12 strangers. The compliance officer testified and kept her license by giving up everyone above her. The parents of Marcus Hale started a fund in their son's name for patient advocacy, and the first check the fund ever wrote paid for a rapid transfuser for the Cape Farrell Emergency Department, the exact machine that had not been on the floor the night 6 SEALs came out of the black water. Danny Vasquez walked back into the ER in the fall, slower than he used to move, and with a scar under his hairline, and he brought Chief Boone with him, thinner, leaning on a cane, alive. Boone found Delia at the charge desk and stood in front of her a long moment, a chief who did not have the words for once. And then he took the challenge coin out of his own pocket, his team's coin, and set it on the counter, between them, face up. "You never put yours down," he said. "So take mine. So there is one on the floor that everybody gets to see." Delia looked at it for a long time. Then she picked it up, and she did not put it in her pocket. She set it on the shelf behind the charge desk, face out where the whole department could see it, and it stayed there, and no one ever dared move it. That is the whole story of the night. The sea handed 6 of its best men to the quietest nurse in the building, and she did not blink, and she did not break, and she did not once wait for anyone to tell her it was allowed. Delia Marsh spent 9 years learning that the past does not break the people who refuse to hold still, and that the loudest thing a person can do is finally stop being quiet when silence is the only thing being rewarded. The water followed her all the way to a coastal town nobody writes about. And when it came, she was ready because some people are only pretending to be small. And the storm is how you find out. If this story reached you tonight, do one thing for the people who work the back half of every board, in every hospital in the country. Tap like, so more people hear it. Subscribe to Silent Rank Stories, so the next one finds you, and share it with someone who has ever been underestimated for how little they say. And tell me in the comments, if you had 6 lives put in your hands as a joke, and the room was waiting for you to fail, what is the first thing you would have done? I read every one.